Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining today's study jam, and I hope that you all are eagerly excited as I am. And this is the first time we DSC HITS is doing something on web development, so we are also very much excited for this event. And this being a virtual event, this is a first time experience for us doing a study jam virtually. So usually study jam happens as a physical event where people bring in their laptops or use our university labs to do all the coding and stuff. But this is going to be something different, a bit virtual. So we'll try our best to make sure that everyone is in line with what we're doing, right? So let's get started. So before we start, I just wanted to ask you guys to let the world know about our study jams, right? You can use the hashtag AMP Study Jams 2020, DSC at home, and tag DSC hits and Google Devs in, right? And maybe you can like quickly grab a picture of this in case you wanted to remember the hashtags later on, right? So let's move on. For the course introduction, let's get started. So a couple of times you might have had issues where, right, as a developer, you might have faced this. You develop websites for fast connections and fast internet and high performance devices. But often a lot of the mobile web users are mobile users. So in case you make websites which are very heavy and has a lot of graphics content and so much of images and colorful things, it might take a while to load on mobile devices because these are not very high performance devices and they're not capable of rendering such heavy content, right? And that is why you often find various circumstances when you open a website on your phone. You often find the website loading very slowly, or the page takes too long to load and becomes unresponsive. And there might be times where you might be reading through the content and suddenly an image pops up, like, and whatever you were reading would have like disappeared. Oh, I have to go down now, right? Or maybe an ad pops up in between or something happens, right? Which isn't a great user experience, which is why there are certain best practices that developers will have to follow to ensure that the website loads properly on mobile devices, right? So whenever we develop websites, even when I develop websites, I often test the website only on a desktop, right? It's not tested across all the devices. I don't really know how well it would look on a mobile device, right? Although I would have certain stylings to ensure that things fit well into the page for mobile users, but we don't often test them, right? So there would be certain best practices which developers will have to follow to ensure that the website looks good on mobile devices. But unfortunately, it is not always very easy. And that is why you have Accelerated Mobile Pages Framework, or AMP, or as we call it, AMP. How does AMP help developers? Now, AMP is a web component library which was initially developed by Google and is now moving to the OpenJS Foundation. So this web component library enforces best practices to developers, wherein there would be certain restrictions and limitations that a developer will have to follow to make a page that looks good and performs well on a mobile device, right? So AMP provides you with three components, three major things. So you have AMP HTML. So this is an extension of the available HTML that we have to make website with the markup. And you have AMP JS with certain JavaScript content, and there are a lot of JavaScript elements which will be restricted, and there are certain rules which you need to follow in order to have JavaScript on your AMP page. And you also have AMP cache. So if your site is going to be optimized well for mobiles and you use AMP for that, your page will be cached on AMP servers, right? So that's how AMP helps you as a developer. and it provides great user experience. Now, these are some of the common tags that AMP provides you, right? So you have the regular AMP, regular HTML tags, and apart from that, you have a lot of them. So in case you want to add an image tag, you have AMP image, you have AMP YouTube, you have AMP Facebook, and a lot of other things. So these are all run by small parts of JavaScript on browser. So that JavaScript is being handled by the AMP backend. So you need not worry about that. So, your content is going to be delivered seamlessly and with good performance so that, your users will have a great experience. So with HTML, when you want to add something like you want to add a YouTube video, you use iframe, right? You use iframe, and with the parameter source, you add the URL and you embed it, right? But with AMP, that becomes easier, right? You have a tag called as AMP YouTube. You just mention how the layout should be, mention the width and height, just provide the video ID, right? So you have something like youtube.com slash a character set, right? That is a video ID. You just put the video ID there, and that video is going to be embedded to your AMP website, right? You don't have to provide the URL or do the iframe and add custom stylings there. Now, for throughout this study jam course, the basic prerequisite for you is that you would have to know HTML so that you understand what we are doing. CSS is not very much required. Maybe a bit of styling is fine. And for the beginner workshop as today, we don't require JavaScript, so that is totally fine, right? Even if you don't know JavaScript, if you're fine with HTML and CSS, then we are good to go. So getting started. So throughout the study jam, we'll be using something called as glitch. I don't know how many of you are aware of glitch, but it's an online code editor. If you know CodePen, for example. So this is an online code editor platform where you can make your code and save it and share it with people, right? So in case you don't know glitch and you haven't used it before, it's well and fine, but you will be using it today. So to get started, we have a repository for the workshop, which we'll be using throughout the course. All right. So let me just minimize my browser and go to this website. So this is glitch. All right. So this repository has been set for AMP Study Jam beginner course. So you can use this page, use this repository to play with and experiment with AMP, right? So now, in order for us to edit and learn AMP, we'll be using this platform, right? So you can also follow along with me. I'll just drop this link on Meet right away so that in case you want to do it, you can. Else you can follow with us later, right? You can just see what's happening and do this later as well. So right now what I'll be doing is just click on Remix Your Own. So Remix is nothing but it's kind of forking the repository. So if you have used GitHub before, you would know what forking is. So it's kind of forking the repository now so that I can edit and play with it, right? So I've got my own URL here, right? There's a bit of README which you can read later. There is server.js and JSON file which we don't need as of now. What we'll be doing is going into the public folder, and most of what we do will be playing with the index file, index.html, right? So now for me to see what's exactly happening, I just have the code. I need to see what is happening, right? So what I'll do is just go on top left show button and click next to the code. So I get a preview of my website here, right? So this HTML is rendered over here, right? And towards the left of the platform, we have something called as assets. Now, assets is where you have a list of all the images which you can use as example for your experiment, right? So we'll be making use of this. Now, let me just get back and continue. So, I've explained what glitch editor is and how it works, right? So in case if you're kind of like going to try this out along with me, you can do so. I've dropped the link in the chat section as well on Google Meet, so you can make use of the link and follow up with me. But if not, if you just want to just see what's happening, that's totally fine. You can do this later in case you have certain internet issues and all that, right? Now, to just get started and set up, we'll be using the AMP validator, right? So AMP validator is nothing but a project, a validator site which AMP has made to show, to kind of show you validation issues in your AMP website, right? So whenever you make something with AMP, and if you have errors, then that page will not be loaded as an AMP. For example, I remove this line. So it says that the mandatory tag meta is required, right? So likewise, now coming back to the slides again. Now let's try to run a basic HTML page, right, into converting into an AMP page. Now, so if you would have used HTML, you know that a document starts with the HTML tag, right? You can add a language option, but when you go with AMP, you add a lightning bolt icon or you use just HTML AMP, right? So whenever you start an AMP website, you need to do this first, right? This is fundamental, and this is how you start an AMP page, right? So about the lightning bolt icon, not everybody would have it. For example, like if you're a Mac user, you can simply go to the emoticons and choose the lightning bolt icon. But in case you don't have that option, then it's totally fine to use HTML AMP. Both works well. Both works the same way, right? So thinking about the components, how does AMP work? So for example, you need to add an image. Told that we have extended components in AMP, right? So in case you want to add an AMP image, you use the AMP image tag and you provide the source and also define how you want the layout to be, right? But in case you're using normal HTML, you do something like this, right? So you use image source, you provide the URL, and that's it. But with AMP, you do something like this. And also another example. So if you're going to embed a Twitter tweet on your website, this is the amount of code that Twitter gave me when I had to embed a tweet into my website, right? I got this whole code from publish.twitter.com. So in case you're not familiar with it, Twitter has a page wherein you can generate code for your website to embed certain tweets or maybe a profile or whatever, right? But now coming into AMP, this is all you need. All you have to do is use the AMP Twitter, mention the layout and add the tweet ID there. And the tweet is going to be displayed in the website properly, right? Another example is the YouTube, which we already saw before. So you have to use the AMP YouTube tag to embed a YouTube page into your website. So now talking about these components, I was talking that in order for these components to work, you will have to use small parts of JavaScript, right? So this is how your JavaScript source will look like. So you will have to import these sources into your HTML website. So all you have to do is just add a script like this in order for things like AMP YouTube and AMP Twitter to work, because these are called as extended components, right? These are not part of the inbuilt components. These are extended components. right? So another thing which I wanted to show you is that, so remembering this line is pretty easy, because all you have to change is the tag which you're going to use, and over here you need to change the name. All right. So if you look, all I had to do is change AMP Twitter to AMP YouTube, and over here AMP Twitter to AMP YouTube. So it's pretty easy to remember this, right? So that's why AMP is beautiful, right? Now, to explain how AMP works, you need to know the AMP boilerplate, right? What is a boilerplate now? It's a kind of a template which you follow, right? A code template. For example, if you've taken part in some online coding competitions, like for example on CodeChef or whatever, you would see a boilerplate code generated for you, right? Suppose you use Java, then you will have your Java boilerplate, wherein a class and a function is already created for you. All you have to do is type your function blocks and the class block, right? Similarly, if you go for a C program, then you have the headers and the void main function there. So that is a boilerplate code. Similarly, we also have boilerplate for AMP, right? You can get your boilerplate code from amp.dev/boilerplate, which also I'll show you. So this is a very basic boilerplate. So in case you need a lot of other things, like you need Google fonts, you can ask what type of font do you need. You need analytics, then you add analytics. So it's like plug and play, and you get your boilerplate code ready. So you can make, just copy paste into your file and you're ready to go, right? Now let me just go through the AMP boilerplate. Just like HTML, regular HTML, even AMP files have the extension filename.html, so there's not much of a change. You begin a HTML page with doc type HTML, that is to define that this particular document has HTML markup, right? And then you open a HTML tag. The only change is that you add a lightning bolt icon or the AMP tag, right? So you open it, and then you add a list of head tags. So this is wherein you define all the essential components for your website to work, right? So you mention the various scripts and styles which you'll be using for your website, and you will also add your titles and etc. over here, right? So that is the head, and then you have your body, as simple as that. So that's the AMP boilerplate. Now going through the head tag, now the meta character set. Now you use the UTF-8 character set by default, and this is like pretty common everywhere because UTF-8 supports almost every characters today, and even emojis are supported, and that is why I use UTF-8. Particularly, like for example, you have HTML lightning bolt. Lightning bolt is an emoji, so you need to use UTF-8 so that the browser recognizes all those characters, right? And then you add a link, canonical link reference. Now suppose you're kind of going to have a website separate for the desktop and separate for your phones. So this is just a kind of a redirection for your browser to tell that, hey, suppose if the person uses a desktop, then go to this particular link. And you add another canonical reference to that website, that HTML page. So if the user is opening it on a phone, then it tells the browser that, hey, this is a phone, so go to this website, right? So that is why you use a canonical reference here. And then you add a meta viewport. So a viewport is just to set the initial scale for the website. So you mentioned the initial margins for the website so that when you get started, the layout, the DOM elements will load properly. So that is why you add a viewport, and this is like pretty common. If you use HTML5 and you need a responsive website, you add this code, right? uh, if you have developed websites, you would know this. And after this, you have something called as the AMP boilerplate styles. So this is mandatory. So this style is actually used to kind of like hide your website. Meanwhile, all the JavaScript content loads, right? So that your AMP website will look well instead of just showing like it's like kind of lazy loading, to avoid lazy loading, right? So it's common practice that if you're in web development, you would know that a browser first renders HTML, then renders CSS, and then renders JavaScript. All right. So that is why we are blocking. We are like kind of blocking and like hiding the website until the JavaScript loads. So this is the style which we would use, and this is available as the boilerplate code, so you need not worry about it. And finally, at the end, you add the script tag of the AMP project. So by adding the script, all the fundamental built-in tags will start working, right? So you use the script here. And as a best practice, you will have to use this boilerplate code as it is. You cannot add your script to the end of HTML like you used to add jQuery at the end of your file if you develop websites. You shouldn't be doing that, right? It should be exactly where it's supposed to be. Now, the order of all these tags inside the head component can change. That's totally fine, but it shouldn't be placed anywhere else outside the head tag. That's important. Now, hope that you understood what all this is. So before we start, in case if there are any questions, maybe we can just clarify it, right? So there's one question over here. What is the file extension to be given when we use AMP code in our HTML file? So like I told you, there's no special extension. You can use filename.html. It's going to work, right? All the way how browser recognizes that it is an AMP page is using the AMP validation which you add in your HTML, right? So that's pretty much. So you can name your name the file whatever you want. It can be like index.amp.html. It can be index1.html. It can be like mobile.html, whatever you want it to be. Okay. There's something someone has told, syntax highlighting in the presentation looks awesome. Can you please share it? So this is a document which Google has shared directly. So it's not recommended for us to share this presentation with you directly, but anyway, all the resources in the website will be shared with you. All right. Now with that said, I think you guys are clear, but in case you have any doubts, please do feel free to ask me. Let me look into the chat section before moving on. Can you once again explain the style AMP boilerplate? Okay. So the style AMP boilerplate is just a style which you add to hide your website before the JavaScript is loaded fully, right? So till your JavaScript is being loaded, you shouldn't be displaying your website so that users don't have inconsistent experience, right? The components might look very different before the JavaScript loads, and that is why you add a style. And also I forgot to tell you that we add a no script after the style tag. So this is particularly because in case a browser doesn't let you load scripts, then no script is kind of fallback, right? So generally no script is used for JavaScript codes wherein if a JavaScript couldn't run, you mention a fallback as in what to happen. But in this case, suppose if something goes wrong and the style isn't working properly, you add a fallback, right? So that is why you use a boilerplate style. Another question is, can we host AMP pages in any hosting site, or is there a separate hosting site available? No, totally no. You can even run an AMP website on your local host itself. You don't need any kind of compiler or you don't need a web server to run it, right? So you can even host it on GitHub and things are going to work very well. So that's it. I think we'll move on. Um, Okay, there's one more. Can it be used partially, for example, in normal HTML? I want to use AMP YouTube or AMP Twitter. Is that possible? No. If you're planning to have AMP, then you should be fully AMP, else you don't use it, because there will be a lot of validation issues happening, and probably that will affect your browser, the website performance, right? So that is why it's pretty much not recommended. So okay, so I think for the rest of the questions we'll keep it for the next exercise. Now moving on to the first component, AMP image. The goal of this exercise is to fix validation issues on a website, use the first AMP component, and learn how AMP component replaces some of the common HTML tags, right? So first thing which we are going to do is use a built-in component called as AMP image, right? So that's what we'll be doing. So I'll be using the glitch code editor now, right? So all the code which we have here is pure HTML5 and there is no AMP here, right? For example, I taken this code and put it on my AMP validator. You can see the number of errors, right? The mandatory attribute is missing, and this image can only appear as a no script fallback. So you should be using AMP image, and you have all the validation issues listed below. So we'll try to fix each and everything. What I'll do is use the boilerplate code, right? I'll be using all of the things from the head tag, and I will replace all of these inside my head tag, and I'll be typing HTML AMP. That's the first part, right? So now we are ready to change content to an AMP image. So what I'll be doing is AMP-IMG, and now thing isn't loading. What I'll do is kind of close this tag, and that is done. And we still have some issues which isn't loading. Let's see what is it. You need to specify the source width and height, right? So what we'll do is specify the width and height. Let's go here. So width equals 640 and height equals 480. And now that has loaded our AMP component, right? Now, if you see, this isn't responsive. For example, I kind of do this, right? If my device width changes, the image width doesn't change. Now, so what do? I add another attribute called as layout equals responsive. And now, if you see, your image is responsive, right? If you are a web developer, you would know how much of pain it takes to make an image responsive by adding a lot of CSS code, right? You will have to add a media tag for various device width so that it looks better, right? So, okay, so I think we have done this. We have arranged our website, we have added the responsive component, and so the first exercise is done. So pretty much what we have done is add an AMP image, and let's see if this is AMP validated or not, right? So let me just copy the whole thing, and drop it in the AMP validator. Yes. So there are no AMP errors right now. So there are no AMP validation issues, which means all all the components on my website is AMP validated and it's perfect to be launched, right? So the first exercise is it's successful. We did it well. So now looking at the layouts, I just mentioned responsive, right? Now what do these layouts mean? So there are certain other layouts which we have apart from responsive. For example, you can use fixed layout, you can use intrinsic. So let's see what happens when you mention fixed. So when you say fixed, it is going to fix your image dimensions to the width and height that we specified, right? It will not shrink or it will not expand apart from that, right? And then you have intrinsic, intrinsic, which is, so in case your device width is smaller than the image, then the image will shrink. But if the image is larger than that, it won't change, right? So those are the layouts. Now let me just change it back to responsive. All right. So that's about the AMP image. And successfully we have completed it. And see how easy was it, right? It just took me a matter of seconds to convert a normal HTML website to an AMP page. It did not take a lot of time, right? So let me look into the questions again if people have questions. Okay, we have a very beautiful question asked here. Does AMP affect web pages when viewed on a PC? So like I said, AMP is meant for mobile pages, right? It is meant to be used for mobiles, but you can still use AMP to develop websites for a desktop or a PC, right? I'll just show you an example. AMP.dev is a very beautiful example. Now this is totally AMP, all right? You can see my AMP validator is green, which means this website is running on AMP, right? So if you're kind of using AMP and if you can kind of make something for a PC, then well and good, you can use it for a PC as well. But then generally, if you have a website which works very well on a PC, you just want a mobile page, you just develop an AMP page and add a canonical reference like I told you before, right? That should work. Another one is, does AMP is good for ad serving, AdSense? I don't know if I understood your question well. So I think you asked me if AMP supports ad serving. If that is the case, yes, AMP does support ad serving. So you can look into the documentation, how do you do all of that. But for the beginner course, we are not going to look into any of that, right? Another question is that, does AMP affect any styles on my website? So it doesn't affect you directly. There is a limitation on how you use styles, right? So for example, if you look into the boilerplate, you have something called as style AMP custom, right? So this is where you define all your styles, all the custom styles which you need to add. Now you have a 75 KB limit on having CSS, additional CSS. So in case you're planning to use kind of heavy styles, that might not work, but you still can use CSS. There's another one. How can we apply a margin to the whole website, whole AMP page? Right now the image is appearing without any border. Yes, that is possible. So you can add a custom CSS, which we will be doing later in this course. Okay, so we'll be looking at that after a few exercises, so no need to worry. I'll show you that. What are the so that's another one. What are the companies using AMP to build their web pages and how effective is it than others? So let me show you something. All right. So in order to simulate a mobile, I'll be using the developer console, right? So you can just kind of have a mobile environment very easily. So what I'll do is now go in and search COVID-19 India, right? So if you scroll in a bit, you can see all these websites are AMP served, right? You can see they have been marked with a small lightning bolt icon, right? So these are all AMP served, right? Further, even if you scroll down a bit, you can see that things like financialexpress.com has AMP. You would have Hindu using AMP, right? So if you kind of open any one of those, you can see that it works well. It is meant to be for mobiles. But now if I close the developer console, you see that things are broken. Like one of our friend asked us, how does it affect a website on a PC? So this is how an AMP page will look on a PC if you don't optimize it for PCs, right? Now, if you look at the URL, this is how it looks, right? Google.com/. So this is because the website is being cached onto the Google servers, and that is why you have a custom link here. Now I just refresh this, and you see you get the desktop page, right? So that's how it works. So I couldn't, I don't know how many companies use it today, but a lot of people are using it. A lot of blog writers are using it. A lot of news agencies are using it. Okay, let me see. Can we access all the features of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in AMP? Not really. So there are certain restrictions on how you use CSS and JavaScript. But although if you want to use features of HTML, yes, there is a lot of relaxation on how you can use HTML onto your AMP website, right? Just on top of all those HTML content, you can use AMP extended components, right? But there's although limitation on how and where and how much of CSS or JavaScript you can use on your website. With that said, okay, there's someone who has asked in the chat section. I didn't know what that flash icon meant until today. Okay, all right. So that is a logo. That is the logo which AMP uses, right? So if you look into the AMP website itself, this is their AMP logo, right? So that's the thunder, the lightning bolt icon. So that's, I think these are the questions we had for now. Okay. I think we're well good to go with the next exercise since you understood how AMP works, right? So let me quickly move on. So we'll see how to embed a YouTube video onto your website, right? So you'll be embedding a YouTube video and use the layout component and other attributes as well. So all you need to do is use the extended component AMP YouTube instead of using the embedding script that is provided by YouTube on their website, right? So uh, this what you see over here is the video ID, right? So whenever you click on any YouTube video, you will have an ID, right? Maybe let me just quickly show you what a ID is. Okay, right. So you open anything, you have an ID over here. So this is the ID we will be using to embed a YouTube video onto your AMP website, right? So all you're going to do is below the image which we added, we'll be adding a YouTube component with size 480 and 270, right? You can use any video ID you want, but I'll be using the AMP YouTube, which I have mentioned here. Let me just quickly copy this and drop it below my website. I'll be opening another div tag, which is a best practice to always separate each and every component using div. All right. So now you see I've added the component here, but my video hasn't loaded. You have any idea why didn't that happen? Maybe you can quickly answer me on the chat section if you know what the answer is. Okay, any case, so if you don't know, it's just it's a kind of extended component script which you need to add, right? So we saw this, right? You need to add a script for any extended component use. So I'm just going to quickly copy this and drop into my website inside the head tag. Okay, there you go. And here you have the video loaded, right? Now again, you would see that the video isn't actually kind of, it's sticking to the image, right? So you can just add a custom code, custom style so that, you can avoid that. So what I'll do is I'll quickly create a class, div class video section. And what I'll do is go into the video component, sorry, the custom styles, and add the class video section and quickly define margin top 10 px, which should essentially have some gap between your image and the video, right? So likewise, you can have your custom styles added to your website in case you feel that something is not looking good, right? So right now what we did is add a YouTube video and it works well, right? It plays. So yes, so we have added that as well. So there we go. Now finding the right component. How will you find the right component for your AMP website? Apart from the AMP YouTube and AMP images, how do you get it? All you have to do is go to the AMP, the website, the documentation. You have all the uh, tags listed on their website, right? So once you go here from A to Z, it has been listed. So you can quickly click on whatever you want. For example, AMP Twitter, and you get the documentation with all the details, what happens and what is the layout supported, and you have examples, and also the behavior has been mentioned here, right? So that's the documentation quickly for you. So in case you want to kind of do something with the website, like kind of add extended components, you can do so. Now there'd be quite a couple of questions which we would ask. What does this component do? How do I use it? How can I customize it? How do I add styles to it? And does it require its own script tag? And what layouts are supported, right? So like I said, in the documentation, everything is explained clearly so that you can just look into it, right? Let me quickly go into presentation mode and let me just set up, right? Cool. All right, good to go. So that's about the documentation, and so each and every section will explain you what each of these things do, right? So yes, successfully we have done the exercise number 2, that is to embed a YouTube video onto your website successfully, right? So before moving on to the third exercise, let me see if there are any questions again. uh, um, okay. Okay, someone has shared AMP dev success stories. Perfect. So you can actually look into this website to see all the success stories which AMP has been facing. Let me quickly open it for you again. So these are all the companies which have successfully implemented AMP on their website. And thanks to whoever has shared that. I don't know who has shared, your name is anonymous. Anyways, okay. Okay, there's another one. Is AMP relevant to SEO for quickly appearances on searching pages? So AMP is not directly an SEO tool, but yes, AMP works well and plays well with search engine optimization because AMP enforces all the best practices for your website. There is a lot of SEO which will work well because, moreover, if your AMP is validated perfectly, it is going to be cached onto Google servers, which means SEO happens quite quickly across all the search engines, be it Google, be it Bing, be it Yahoo, whatever it is, right? That's another question. Can we use user-defined components in AMP? I am not sure if that is possible right now, right? So maybe yes in future. I'm not really sure if AMP has got that on their milestone, but I'm not really sure. Another question, is this an end to bootstrappy stuff? AMP should serve comparatively better with fewer lines of code. I don't know if I could agree with it, but Bootstrap itself is something which is different from AMP. But yes, if you're planning to kind of replace Bootstrap on your website, yes, you can go ahead. That's totally up to you, right? Because with Bootstrap, I don't know if you have faced this, you will have to optimize your website a lot, right? When I created websites with Bootstrap, it took me like a couple of days to actually optimize the website to render properly across all the devices. So I don't know if I could say if it is an end to Bootstrap really, right? I don't have an answer, sorry for that. And that's another question on the chat. Can you please explain the AMP YouTube tag? So maybe for you, let me explain again. So actually when you go onto a YouTube video, right? And if you want to embed, all you do is you go onto the share and you had the embed tag, embed icon. And this is the script, or this is the markup which they give you to embed videos onto your website, right? But when you look at that, that is an iframe, right? And sometimes if you add this, let me add this onto the website and show you what happens exactly, right? Below this, let me quickly open a div tag and add it for you. So see what happens. It's not responsive and it's sticking to the left, right? It's not responsive at all. And that is why we use AMP HTML. Now what AMP HTML does is it provides you with a custom component where you will only have to mention the video ID here. Now what is a video ID? The small part of the ID which is present after the YouTube URL is your video ID. All you have to do is add it to the video ID parameter here and mention the layout, the width and height, and that is all you have to do. Your YouTube video is going to be embedded on your website and it is responsive, right? And can we attach class and ID attributes to AMP components? Yes, you can do that, right? So suppose you want to do AMP YouTube, you can say class equals something YouTube bit, and you can add an ID as well, right? Some ID. That's fine. You can do that, right? So it's totally allowed and you can make use of it. So I think those are the questions which we had till now. Now moving on to the third exercise, which is to create an image slideshow. Now, I don't know how many of you have tried this before, but if you need to add a slideshow or an image slider, you would have to use an external JavaScript source into your website. You need to add a lot of styles and it is quite painful, right? But with AMP, it is going to be really easy and I'm going to show you how to do it. So our goal here for this exercise is to add carousel of images to our website, right? So like I told you, we have the assets folder on glitch. We'll be using using the folder again. But anyway, as of now, let me just show you quickly what AMP carousel does. So it gives you a responsive layout. And like you can see on the GIF over here, you get an image slider wherein you can move, you can slide across images, right? Now we'll be using all the images which is present on glitch, right? Now just for me, to make things easy for me, I'm just going to copy this code and drop it over here. I'll open a div, paste it here. Now you see again, the component hasn't loaded. Why hasn't it not loaded? I already told you why. Okay. Anyway, you have to add a custom script because it is again an extended component, right? So all you have to do is copy it and add it to the head again. Here you go. And let's see if we got it. Okay. Now our images aren't loading. That is because the URL is broken here. Now let me quickly fix the URL. Okay. Perfect. Now everything loads well and you can see the image slider working well, right? Now for our exercise, we saw that we need to add it on top of the YouTube video, right? Add a carousel above the YouTube video. So it's again simple. All you have to do is copy this div again and replace it above here. There you go. As simple as that, right? So you have the image slider here. And successfully we have again did it. We have the carousel, the image slider working well. So let me quickly again jump back into the presentation mode. And okay, perfect. So we have added the custom component and we have it working, guys, right? Now discovering new components, how do you do it? All you have to do is go into the AMP documentation, amp.dev, go into the documentation, go into the components. And you have all the components listed here, right? Now, if you want to learn something, you have guides and tutorials, which you can use to learn, right? And you have templates, which you can use. You have courses, which you can learn. And there's a lot more available on the AMP documentation, right? Which is amazing. So that's what we spoke about. We spoke about the documentation. Let's skip this. Now, coming to the fourth exercise, if you have any questions, let me just wait. Let me just again look into it. There is something called as one code, no AMP for desktop review. And okay, there's some question over here. One code, no AMP for desktop preview and AMP for mobile preview. Is it possible? I didn't understand this question exactly. If possible, maybe you can type it in the chat section, maybe so that I can understand it well. What, as far as I understood, is that if you can use a single code base to make previews for desktop and mobile, you can do it, but then what looks good on mobile will not look good on desktop. Well, you can although make it work well by adding media queries. If you're familiar with media queries on CSS, you can do it. So that isn't an issue. You can do it, or you can choose to use a separate you can use a separate index HTML for desktops. Okay, okay. Can we use ordinary style.css for designing our AMP elements? You can do it. You can have ordinary style.css, but the only restriction is that you have a 75 KB limit, right? So those are the questions we had. I think, let me move on. So the fourth exercise is to add social links on to your website, right? So how do you add it? So again, you have an extended component, which is pretty easy to do, right? So what we'll be doing is add a set of social sharing links to our site and see if we can, kind of add styles to it. So to directly let people share content from your website to a third-party platform, you can use the social sharing links, right? So you can find all the details on the documentation, but for now we'll be trying this, right? Let me quickly jump off the presenter view and copy this, go into the index and paste it here below. Let me just format it. Now you see that again, this hasn't loaded, right? That is because you will have to use an extended component script, right? So again, copy this and add it to the head. And this should work now. Yes, that works, right? Now again, over here, you can add whatever styles you want to make it look beautiful, right? But for now, we are not going to look into it. So what happens when you click on these links? It will redirect to your social media platform where you can share the details, right? So the link has been added directly, which means you need not have custom JavaScript or any kind of code to kind of send this information to a third-party site, right? All you have to do is add the code and it starts working. So that's about the extended component to add social sharing icons, right? So we have completed 4 exercises right now. I don't know how many of you have done all the 4 exercises, but in case if you haven't tried it yet, please do try it after the session. But if you did, that is very well and good. Please do share that success story on social media and proudly let the world know that you made your first AMP website during AMP Study Jams 2020, right? So moving on to AMP, what is AMP and how you can have all the extra features and all the additional features you have with AMP. Now there were questions related to CSS and how you can use. So this is the answer for you. CSS can be included using the style AMP custom tag, right? Or as inline styles, you can add it between your body tag, that is fine, right? So by doing this, it increases your page performance because again, there is a custom JavaScript that is optimizing all the code for you. So like I said, you cannot use there are certain restrictions, like you cannot use things like important, and you cannot use transition animations as in when you like, right? So some CSS will be restricted. And like I said, there is a limit of the amount of size of styles which you can use, that is 75 KB, right? So there was a question earlier, how do you how do you add margins to the whole site, right? All you have to do is define a custom style in your into the code and it's going to work. Now let me go quickly and add a padding of 20 pixels over here. All right, body padding 20 px. And so every element in your HTML now has padding on all the sides, right? So and that is how you add custom styles to your website. You can add more. There is a lot of other examples given here, but we've just tried one, right? Now, AMP validation is very important for your page to work well. So now what I'll do is copy whole of the whole code and put it into the AMP validator and see if it is validated. Looks like there are no errors and it has passed the AMP validation, which means my page is ready to be served and cached onto the AMP servers, right? So if I host it, it's going to be cached immediately. So like I showed you before, the lightning bolt icon before the URL, right? So that indicates that the page is cached onto the AMP servers, right? So only for those pages which have that AMP cached feature will show up. So to optimize performance is why AMP has a caching server, right? So it will cache all your images and fonts, and there will be certain restrictions on the image dimensions and all that, right? And the best part is that AMP HTML has a lot of built-in security features, like it sanitizes your HTML so that it prevents cross-site scripting and other parsing errors. Apart from that, it has certain restrictions on how you can embed a third-party website into your website, right? So if you're using an iframe, then there are certain policies which you need to follow to allow a cross-origin resource into your website, right? So you will have to add policies to prevent any kind of attacks like a cross-site request forgery and other things. So now we have looked into all the exercises. We just have a bonus exercise which we'll quickly look into. All right. So our goal is to add a menu to the website. Now I assure you that this menu will not look very good. All right. So it's just a functional menu bar which we'll be adding, right? So you add a sidebar with an ID and you add actions open, toggle and close, right? So let me quickly just copy the code and add it here. So you see this is the header tag which we have inside our body. So what I'll do is replace this header with the header which we have here. And you need to add the action, the event which you need to trigger. So you use the AMP sidebar element, which will be added below your header. And you will have to add the extended component again, right? I will just copy it and drop it before head close. Now you see we have not so good looking, but a functional menu bar, right? So this is how you add a menu bar to your website, right? And see how easy it was to do it, right? All it took was just a few lines of code to do it, right? So that's how easy it is. And with that, coming to the end of the course today, congratulations to everyone who has created your first AMP web page. Feel proud of yourself, tweet it on social media and let the world know, and keep learning about AMP and keep building, right? So today we did a very basic AMP site with no validation errors. We learned how to add images, carousels, YouTube videos, and social sharing buttons. We also added a menu today. So apart from this, you can try adding events to respond to user inputs, key presses. You can invoke actions. You can create event callbacks. You can combine components to make more good looking elaborate user interfaces, right? So you can continue working on this cheeseback website, which we built today. And if you want to have a repository with all the completed exercises, you have the link here, which you can take a look. So this is the final part with all the code completed. And this is the final version, which you will be building, right? So you can also remix and play along with it. And yeah, share your success story, right? You can proudly tell that you made a fast mobile friendly website with AMP today at AMP Study Jams. Don't forget to tag us and Google Devs in. You can add a screenshot of what you did, right? And that's it from our side. And follow us for any kind of updates and future events which we do. All right. And it's time for Q&A session. If there are any Q&A, we'll follow up. Let me resume the questions section again. In case you have a question, you can add it here. So let me look into the chat section. If we include external CSS file, then do we have to write style amp custom tag? So if you it's usually not recommended to add an external CSS file. All right. All you have to do is use the style amp custom tag so that you don't have any validation errors, right? And that's the answer for you. Does AMP affect our backend functionality? No, AMP is not going to affect your backend functionality. For example, if you're going to create a node app, then it's not going to affect the backend functionality in any way, right? Backend is going to process the way it is going to work, right? Okay. Will AMP page work offline like PWA? Is it possible to also add shortcut to mobile home screen as an AMP shortcut? So AMP has very good integration with PWA, right? So you can use AMP as a data source to your PWA, or maybe you can use it as a reference to your PWA, or you can directly use all the content. You can use PWA to serve your AMP page on mobiles. You can do that. And so automatically when you use a progressive web app, you will be able to add a shortcut to your home screen, right? Regardless of whether it's a mobile or it's a desktop, you will be able to add. Is it possible to use other libraries like jQuery, Angular, React? So you need not use jQuery. That is the point here, right? So most of all the problems which we had with jQuery is being solved by AMP, right? For example, the image slider, which is available in jQuery, you need not use it, right? You can use the AMP image carousel to add your image slider. And talking about Angular or React, you can use Angular or React along with the AMP page. It is totally fine. So, you know, that doesn't matter. But talking about jQuery isn't fine because, you know, AMP is already there and providing you all the features that jQuery will be providing you. Also, material design, can we use the material design CSS? AMP by default supports material design, so no need to worry, right? Unless you would add components which does not fit the material design, then maybe you can try it. But by default, AMP supports material design, so you need not worry about that. And that's another question on the chat. Is AMP only for HTML? Yes, AMP is only for HTML. But not to confuse. So if you're making something like a Node app, or if you're going to develop a Flask application, the markup, the HTML markup can be extended with AMP, right? So AMP is for HTML. But then again, AMP has other supports as well. For example, you can have AMP for emails. You can have AMP for other things. For example, let me go into the AMP website. Quickly show you. So you can have AMP for websites. You can have AMP for ads, creating ads. You can have AMP for emails, and you can, you know, if you're kind of like a blog writer, or you would know about these stories. So you can create stories as well, right? So you can make stories and add it to your website. So that is the feature which is available with AMP, which means AMP supports more than HTML. There was a question someone has asked, will we get a certificate after participation? Unfortunately, no, because any event that DSC does, we are not We are not advised and recommended to provide certificates unless Google provides them directly, right? And there was another question asking the recording for the session will be available later, right? Yes, it will be available. I guess those are the questions that we had for today. In case you don't have any questions, we can wind up for today. All right. Or if you have any quick questions, you want to unmute yourself and talk, you can talk, or else we can move on. All right, I guess no one has got questions. So that's it from my side, and that's the end of today's study jam. Hope you guys enjoyed it and hope you guys learned something new. And we hope you will develop websites with AMP in future and make amazing, stunning user experiences, right? So thank you so much for attending today's study jam. Please keep exploring all the features and all the available tools which AMP provides, make stunning websites, and let us know what you built, right? Tag us on Twitter so that we'll know what you are doing, right? And that's it from my side. Thank you so much for joining today's call. And we'll be closing the session now if nobody has got questions. All right, looks like no one has got questions. So thank you so much, guys. Bye. Take care. Have a great day ahead.